Joel was kind enough to mention off the top, I've had the only word I can think of it is honor of doing this for 17 straight years here at the Sport Hall. And every year I try at the very outset for about 2 minutes to tell a little story that is poignant and pertinent to the evening. I'm old for 16, but I'm also from North Dartmouth, so I always think the next year is going to be better. And I was thinking, what applies to tonight? And every class at the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame out of 10 is at least an 8.75. So we got great athletes and builders here. Once in a while, though, once every 5 or 6 years, you get a class like this one tonight that's a 10 plus. I think you'll all agree this is cream of the crop. I remember back in 1995, I started at CBC Sports in Halifax, and almost immediately from day one, I'd get calls from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. And people would say, you got to come see this little guy play hockey. And I'd say, how good can he be? They'd say, trust me, come over. He was 8 years old playing against 11 and 12-year-olds. And finally, I relented and with the camera went over to watch Sidney Crosby play for Cole Harbour in one game against Shearwater. And the score was 13-5 for Cole Harbour. And number 9 for Cole Harbour had 10 goals and 2 assists. After the game, I had the pleasure of conducting his first ever TV interview ever. So I sat him down and I said, when did you know you were a good hockey player? And with the mix of sort of humility and quiet confidence that defines him to this day, he said, well, he had a very high voice. He said, well, I remember back in novice, I scored 189 goals in 12 games. And I realized then I might have a scoring touch. Yes, Einstein, you do. As we finished the interview, I looked down at his little gear bag, and he had a piece of masking tape along the inside of the bag, and it had been worn away by years of sweat and just travel. But I could kind of read, it started with never, and I said, what does that say down there? And he said, never, ever, ever, ever give up. And I said, did you write that? He goes, yeah. I said, where did you get that? He goes, some British guy. Now, this was kind of before Google, but I was determined. I said, I'm going to find out who this British guy was. So I went to the World Book Encyclopedia and found out that Winston Churchill, the greatest orator of all time, the greatest prime minister in British history, once spoke to a school of boys that he attended as a youth. And everybody was so excited because the prime minister was coming, right? The prime minister's coming to speak. The town was abuzz. The school was abuzz. And Churchill gets up and everybody's pumped. And he goes, boys, never, ever, ever, ever give up. And he sat down. And nobody knew what to do. Much like with the Billy Hannon introduction, nobody knew what to do. And Churchill later was asked, what was that all about? And he said, I could have spoken for an hour and not given them a better message. And when I got the email from Bill about this class tonight, I thought, this is the Churchill class. Because I look at this guy here and I see a hockey coach who oftentimes butted heads with the establishment, occasionally. And yet to this day, his players love him. I see a guy here that was a gymnast and a coach. And if you take the combined hours, he's got that 10,000 rule so far in his rear view mirror that he can't even see it anymore. I see a boxer here who at the age of 10 went to this little, I'm sorry, Taylor, smelly basement gym in Halifax. And all of a sudden, I guess how many years later? 8, 9, third best in the world, and judges were lousy. You were second, by the way. I see a guy right here that was told his arm wasn't strong enough. He's only the greatest quarterback ever to play in the CIS. The best high school basketball tournament in Canada by far is in New Waterford, Nova Scotia. By far. The odds of that happening probably at one time weren't high. I see a guy who made it happen. I see a soccer team that likely was told at the national championships in '95, way to make it here, guys, but teams from Atlantic Canada don't win it. Good luck. And finally, I see a guy who lost a leg to cancer as a little guy, went on to become the best swimmer of his generation. Never, ever, ever give up. Because if you don't give up, someday you might make the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame. And that's where we kick things off tonight. Mr. Bottomley, Would you come take a seat, sir? Jim Bottomley, ladies and gentlemen.